All right, that's just a video where I want to go through the very main points of the lesson. So, the first main point is that many Americans supported the war effort. What that means is that there were a bunch of different groups that were able to help during the war. For example, men served as soldiers who were typically very young. So, very young men went out and fought. The Continental Congress actually made it so that every single state, all 13 states, were required to supply soldiers, meaning that they had to. They were forced to supply soldiers to the war effort. Again, they were very, very young, most of them under the age of 16. African Americans supported the war effort, right? Initially, they were banned, but they ended up becoming key players in the fighting because the British ended up getting a lot of the enslaved African Americans to fight for them by promising them freedom. And because of this, the Patriots decided to let the free African Americans fight for them. Women also were a really big part of the war effort, right? Not only did they kind of hold down things at home by making sure that their farms and businesses were running, but they also raised money and made clothing for the Continental soldiers so that they would have enough supplies to keep fighting. Lastly, were used as nurses, messengers, and spies. So what they would do is, because they were not suspected, when they would overhear things about what was going on in the war, they would go back and inform the Patriots so that they knew what to expect. All right, main idea two. The Patriots both won and lost battles during the years 1775 to 1777. So there was 2 years where there were a few battles that were kind of back and forth on who was winning. The first one was Canada. Why? Well, because some patriots really thought that they should take over the British controlled Canada and use that as a 14th colony. This way, they would have more land and more soldiers. But here's what happened: they won the first battle, but then they lost the second battle in Quebec. So, after they lost the battle in Quebec, they pretty quickly lost hope in taking over Canada. They kind of dropped that idea for now. So they're already winning one battle and losing one battle and giving up on getting this 14th colony. Next, they go into New York. There were multiple battles in New York, meaning more than one. And the Patriots, which are the American soldiers, had way less soldiers. And their soldiers had less equipment, right? They were less prepared than the British soldiers who had more money. So the British are winning the series of battles. Because the British are winning, George Washington moves the Patriots on to New Jersey. He decides they are leaving New York. In New Jersey, there are two really big battles, right? The main one I want you to know about is the Battle of Trenton. This is really huge because George Washington kind of broke a treaty that is not a real treaty, but there's kind of like a assumed thing that on big holidays, people are not going to fight. But they've been losing a lot in New York. So in New Jersey, General Washington crossed the Delaware River on Christmas night. Right? And while the soldiers did not expect to be attacked on Christmas night or while they were sleeping, the Patriots attacked the soldiers as they slept and won this battle. There was also another battle in Princeton, and the Patriots won this battle as well. So they're doing really well in New Jersey. Lastly, we get the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga, the Patriots had help from a new general to them who used to actually be a part of the British Army. So the British were trying to take over this whole section here, but this new general was able to kind of understand how they work and help them to win the Battle of Saratoga. Right? The Battle of Saratoga is a very, very big deal because it's a turning point of the Revolutionary War. What that means is that winning this battle starts to turn things around and make it look like there's a lot more hope for the Patriots to win. Main idea three: France and Spain helped the Patriots fight the British. So France and Spain pretty much already hated the British, right? They had their own separate wars with the British and they lost a lot of land. They do not like the British and they're just excited to help somebody out who might actually defeat the British because they want an excuse to help somebody beat the British. So, after the Patriots won the Battle of Saratoga, which was that turning point battle, France, Spain, and Holland decided that they were going to help the Patriots. France signed a treaty and gave them supplies, soldiers, and ships, while Spain was able to stop the British from getting their supplies into the States, meaning that France was giving the Patriots more supplies to make them stronger, while Spain was making sure that the British had less supplies. The British were becoming weaker. Main idea 4. The winter at Valley Forge tested the strength of Patriot troops. So there was one winter where the Patriots had to settle in Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. You may or may not have been there before. So they had to settle in Valley Forge, but they were very low on supplies, food, clothing, and shelter. This really tested their strength, and a lot of them died during that winter, unfortunately. And then lastly, just kind of have the idea that this war isn't only going on in the colonies, it's also happening in the oceans and kind of more west of the colonies, right? In the oceans, the Navy is doing their best because they know that they're too small to fight the big British ships. They're doing their best to stop the supply ships from getting the British soldiers their supplies, which would then weaken the British. And in the West, generals were cutting off the British trade so that they had less supplies. Right? This is very similar to what we saw here, where France was giving us supplies and Spain was making sure the British had less supplies. At the sea, we were stopping supplies and potentially taking them for ourselves. And in the West, we were cutting off trade so that they had less supplies. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm always here after school to help.